Should we promote them in first?
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
I think I promoted the wrong person on accident, but I think it's probably fine. Yes, Jacob Engel, who's been the petitioner's representative, is on his way in. And then Jen, I'm not sure her relationship with the project, but
I believe she is the property owner
okay.
or related to the one of the property owners.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. All right. So, even though this is kind of unofficial, we'll go ahead and get started. Like to welcome you to the Development and Review Committee meeting for February 12th, 2025. Should we do a roll call?
Yes, if you don't mind.
Okay. Roll call of commission members, please. Or committee members.
Sure. Councilmember Brost, Councilmember Preston, Mayor Garitano.
Present.
And Chair Beatty.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does the Department of Planning have any opening comments?
Yes, sir. Thank you. First of all, to all in attendance, including the petitioner and petitioner's representatives, thank you. Sorry, we're shy a couple of members, but again, the weather may be playing a factor. In preparation for tonight's presentation, the department did provide to the Development and Zoning Review Committee members some items of information. Obviously, the agenda was one of them. And as always, we provide the bylaws associated with this particular committee if there's any questions about what you can or can't do and how the procedure for the meeting should be held. Along with that, Mr. Newberry prepared a couple of aerial photographs of the general area of the site, and then one that's at a larger scale, giving a little bit more detail about the site and the surrounding properties. Also, along with that information, the regulating plan from the town center plan was provided, and it indicates these 4 properties as a mix of neighborhood general and neighborhood edge districts. So one's a true single-family detached, and then with the neighborhood general district, again, a variety of housing units types can be allowed. Along with the regulating plan information, we did give you the list of permitted uses within each of the land use categories of town center, the design standards, and a summary version. And then finally, to the petitioner, thank you. He provided a pretty comprehensive package of information for tonight's meeting. Just a few quick facts about the site. Site is just over 10 acres in size. The petitioner is proposing 114 units on the property. It is orientated towards senior living. Those units include attached villas as well as a 3-story building. The petitioner is proposing 201 parking spaces. If you divide the number of units into the parking spaces, it roughly comes out to about 1.75 spaces per unit. It is in the range that the zoning ordinance accommodates. There are no garages. It is all surface parking, and the project would access Manchester Road, a city arterial. And then finally, there are a few physical features that stand out on this site. There is a drainage way that parallels Manchester Road along the frontage of the property. There are some slopes on the north side of the property. And then finally, there are some significant woodlands that have existed on the property for some time. If there's any questions regarding the information that's been provided or anything that the department has presented as part of its brief presentation, I'd be glad to answer any questions at this time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Mr. Engel, would you like to tell us what you've got here?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll fill in some blanks and provide a little bit more information on top of what Joe just provided. There you go. Thank you. What you see here is a proposed site plan for the 10.5 acres that we're discussing, obviously on the north side of Manchester Road, just west of 109, immediately north and west of the old Pond School. Like it was mentioned, the properties within the town center overlay, the land use designation, splits the property. A portion of it, about half of it, is determined to be neighborhood general. The southeastern portion, neighborhood edge. Like was mentioned, 114 total units. What we're proposing is one 3-story building that includes 48 units. That would be 1 and 2 bedroom units. And then the balance of the units are in 4-plex and 1 or 2 duplex units that would include all 2-bedroom units around the edge of the property. We would likely develop it in 2 or 3 phases, depending on how our financing works, starting with the multi-story building plus some of the single-story buildings in phase 1. Something unique here, want to highlight, like I mentioned, the property immediately north and west of the Old Pond School. Something we've shown here and would require some additional discussions to outline details, but something we're proposing is to use a portion of our property shown there as a shared access, an additional ingress egress spot for the city to utilize for the Old Pond School property. And what's shown there is simply the ingress egress to illustrate that. The additional property shown there as a kind of a self-imposed setback for the property, the city could use for additional parking or whatever the most desired best benefit would be for that. But I know parking is something that has been mentioned. So the property allows for that with ample green space. We're of course proposing 114 units, but the way the property is designed, not overly dense, and allows us to utilize some of that property for a community benefit. As I mentioned, just west of 109 on the north side of Manchester, tremendous site, we feel like, for this use. Obviously, lots of community amenities in the area, retail, restaurants, what have you, places of worship immediately across the street. As a senior property, we feel like the residents would really be able to benefit from the YMCA and with the St. Louis Community College campus on the south side of Manchester. As was mentioned, 201 parking spots are what we're contemplating at this point, roughly 1.75 to 1. What we are showing, Travis, if you want to just go to any one of the elevations, is all brick veneer buildings, except for a small portion of board and batten in the gables, but all brick exteriors for the single-story and 3-story buildings. So feel like it's a nice quality design that utilizes the site and the location to the best of our ability. And I'll kind of stop there to see if there are any questions or any other detail I could provide.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Engel. Mayor Garetano, do you have any questions or comments?
Thank you. I'm still digesting all the information here. So if you want to go ahead and get started, David, I'm fine with that, and then I can follow up.
All right. Well, it's an interesting proposal. One question I have for Travis, I know I've asked about this before, but since we have a visual up, that strip of trees in between the Church of Jesus Christ and Latter-day Saints and Pond Elementary, is that where the proposed extension from the community college would go? Of Generations Drive?
Mr. Chair, I think it may be a little bit more to the west where the parking lot is shown.
Oh,
Or
okay,
the
so it
bus,
might
the
take,
bus parking lot. I think that's more accurate for that extension.
okay.
Is that
All right.
correct, Joe?
Yes, sir. Good job.
Thanks.
Okay, so it would be, yeah. I've always kind of wondered about it, but since we have a visual, I admit I'm derailing a little bit, but just for future planning, it's good to see. Because like the petitioner mentioned, the YMCA is not far away. We've got those two churches directly across the street. I know, yeah, I've heard a lot of people comment about the lack of lack of housing choice, and so while personally, I would I want to see more younger people, more access for younger people rather than seniors. I don't know. Even though I'm almost 50, I still feel like I'm 20 something sometimes. But I think it's something the city needs. I'm sure there'll be pushback because it is kind of dense on the west side of 109, but this, like you mentioned, this area is zoned for or it's not zoned, but in the planning document it says general neighborhood edge, and I think this generally fits that. And so
And I'll mention something related to the demographics and what you had mentioned with a current lack of senior housing in the community and in the general West County area. It doesn't give seniors all the options they would necessarily want to have to look at housing options as they age. So providing these housing options for seniors allows them to potentially move out of houses they've been in for decades or other living arrangements that could open up more housing opportunities for younger folks that aren't available now because seniors don't have the housing options they need to move as they age.
oh, for sure. You're definitely not wrong there. Like I just hear so many people feel trapped with the housing situation these days. And people got used to nothing being built for 10 years, and now everyone starts getting all nervous when stuff does get built. But we're still a growing country, and we need to accommodate the growth. So I fully admit I'm probably the most pro-growth person on the commission, but Mayor,
Okay, yeah, I'll dive in. So thank you for bringing this proposal to us here. And, you know, the purpose of this meeting is so that we can give you feedback here to hopefully either incorporate into your design or at least, you know, get the feedback that we have heard from residents in the past. So we have the benefit that we've actually had several proposals come to the city of a similar nature. Not on this side though of 109. I would say those proposals have been more on the east side and most recently land that's on Manchester Road, the same road, closer to Schnucks. So I think, you know, let's maybe kind of start off with maybe some of the positives here that I think stand out. The incorporating of villas, I think, is a big plus because it's a housing style that residents typically provide feedback to us that we don't have enough of in Wildwood. And so we have residents that look to downsize from their homes. They're proud Wildwood citizens. They want to stay in Wildwood, but unfortunately the options are limited. So they really have to look outside of Wildwood and they try to stay close to the area. Many of them have their families, you know, their children and their grandchildren that have moved into the area. And so they end up having to go to Chesterfield or Eureka. But they always tell us our preference would really be if we could just stay in Wildwood. So I think the villas is something that would be very favorably looked at there. Believe, and may I defer to the Department of Planning, Director Vunich. I mean, when I look at this layout, it reminds me of the Meadows of Wildwood, the way the road kind of circles around their property over there. And I also believe that they kind of have their villas kind of in banks, sort of like what you have here, maybe 3, 4, or 2 together. Am I thinking that right? I just don't have their drawing in front of me.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the original plan for Meadows of Wildwood had attached villas. And there were groupings, like you mentioned, of 2 and 3. And this is a little bit of a different circular pattern, but it does make a loop around the entire project. So yes, you're
So,
correct.
all right, so that looks good. Looks like you've accommodated parking. Did I hear correctly, though, that there are no garages for any of these units?
Correct.
That is, I think, something unique that we have not seen. I feel like I can't think of any housing that doesn't have garages. Director Vunich, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, again, depending on the age restriction that may be associated with this project, even the Meadows of Wildwood, the example you use, Mr. Mayor, they have garages plus a driveway apron that accommodates additional parking. So this is a little unusual, but I'm sure Mr. Engel will tell you that seniors typically don't have as many cars as others. Trips aren't as necessarily as frequent, but I'll let Mr. Engel kind of maybe explain that. Thank you.
And just to butt in real fast, Victoria Crossing, the condos in Cherry Hills, those have, some of those units have carports, but that's limited to certain ones, and not every unit has a carport there. Most of it's surface parking.
Yeah, but that was what I was thinking of. I don't see any carports or any kind of shelters there. So maybe, Mr. Engel, just to give you a little feedback here, what we've heard, we had a proposal over in the town center that was proposed by McBride. And one of the big pieces of feedback that we heard from residents there was their concern that cars would be visible on the streets, that everywhere you looked, you'd see a car. And so I kind of think of that comment when I see this proposal, because there isn't any place to hide a car in a garage or out of view. And so I think it kind of brings to life that feedback of that perception of just seeing cars after cars after cars. So that might be a piece of feedback that I could suggest maybe you think of taking away. Perhaps there's a couple of carport options, or something that you can look into to see, how do we not make this into something that really Wildwood is what it tried to avoid, is Wildwood's intention was to be a walkable community. And I think we're prioritizing the cars in this design here. Any feedback or questions on that?
No, well, thinking about the walkable community aspect of it, of course, as we developed this, we would have sidewalks on the Manchester Road frontage, and I know there's been some at least preliminary design work or discussions with bike paths being extended through this area. So we would welcome and do anything we could to incorporate connectivity within this site to the surrounding area related to the garages and carports and parking discussion. I guess one thought I do have on that is, you do see garages and covered parking in multifamily type developments or condo developments. On the multifamily side, those would typically be more expensive, higher end type developments, and what we're trying to achieve here is something that is more reasonably priced to be available and affordable to the majority of the population, not necessarily something that you see with a lot of senior housing now or other multifamily stuff that does have garages and some of the additional structures, is that they're priced at the top end of the market and not necessarily available to the community as a whole. So maybe something we could look into, but what we're trying to achieve here is something that's more affordable to the community as a whole, and trying to be efficient with our development costs by providing the pull-up parking rather than garages throughout the site.
Well, maybe some other ideas that I would suggest is that there be some heavy landscaping to kind of break up the view. I think of the cars, the people driving on Manchester Road, as they turn their head and look, that, we have something that breaks up. Maybe there's, landscaping that's heavily dense between each of these pockets of parking spaces to help break up that view there. It's hard to visualize with this drawing here to see that, but I just want to make sure that we just don't have, flat pavement, and that's all we're seeing there. So that's the feedback. I mean, you probably get more feedback when this goes, if you decide to proceed through our process there. But I think that's the initial part there, the car there. But again, back to the villas. No, nothing negative about that there that I can think of. However, we'll jump to the building there, the 3-story structure. So I think that would be something that that's, as I mentioned before, trying to digest that, trying to think of what other structures of that height are in that area over there. Director Vunich, do we have anything like that on that side there? I mean, the school, that's not even, that's like a 2-story structure.
The school is all, I mean, that's one level. I mean, the
Pond
gym's
is
a little
one.
higher. Yeah.
Honda's one, and the middle school, is that
Middle school's also all on one level.
one? So
But I mean, the church, Living Word, I think that's fairly tall.
yeah,
I think it has a steep gable.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, what I would suggest is that the 2 places of worship that are shown on the site plan, they are, for all intents and purposes, single-story buildings, but they have very high ceiling heights, which almost makes the exterior look like a 2-story building.
Yeah.
And so there is some vertical component to them that for the most part isn't as tall as a 3-story building, but not necessarily just a single story. Thank you.
Well, yeah, and I think 3-story, what's comparable is to take in your mind what is a 3-story building that's a similar one in the middle of the town center, which is in our downtown district. That is I believe, Anthology, formerly called Anthology Assisted Living, but I believe they've gone through another name change just recently. So that is, I guess I think of that and placing that in that area that you're in right here. So, that I think's a bit, I don't know if it's the density part that gets me, or is it the height that gets me, but I think that's where I probably would just see like, that maybe something has to be worked on. I mean, if it was just all villas, I don't think I'd have anything at all to say, but a 3-story structure right there, I wonder if you've got any ideas around that and how that is. And I would like to ask Director Vunich, what your thoughts are for that area there with that kind of structure.
Well, I'll defer to Mr. Engel first, and then I'll
Okay.
address your question, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
I I would say related to the design of the proposed three-story building here and comparing it to, I believe the one that you mentioned just north of City Hall there. You know, we would and we have approached this design in an effort to produce something that would be compatible and pleasing for the immediate area. And while that's a fine building, the comparable one you mentioned, I think what we're working on here will be, for lack of a better word, a more softer look and something that's a bit more compatible with what's further to the west and single family housing. So I'll just say that we've been thoughtful about our product design and knowing the immediate area that we're going into and trying to make a design that's compatible with the villas while you know, providing a little bit more density so that there is more green space available on the site.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, I'd like to get the director of planning's thoughts too.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think collectively, the three-story building plus the villas creates that density number. And looking at the density in the town center, the zoning district that would accommodate this type of activity at the density proposed is the R6A, and that's a 4,000 square foot resident district. So taking 114 units into the size of the lot, and that's going to be the net size, meaning we do require some deductions for right-of-way dedication, et cetera. I think the density is probably going to exceed what the R6A 4,000 square foot resident district requires. And so if the villas are the most appealing component of the project, I would just ask the applicant to maybe consider reducing the density to meet the maximum that's allowed by our town center plan via the three-story building, not necessarily reducing the villa count. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Joe. Yeah, then you make a good point. If it's above what this area calls for, I mean, that would need to be addressed.
And when we receive a formal submittal, if the project does move forward, the engineer will provide those density calculations and verify the difference between the gross acreage of the site and the net acreage of the site. And the net acreage of the site is what we use to calculate the allowable number of units. So that's just a kind of a quick analysis, but it is at the very top of the density allowance in town center. Thank you.
And just so I'm following what was just mentioned there, is the thought that based on the net allowable acreage, the R6 zoning would allow something less than the 114 units?
And again, Mr. Engel, that's just a quick analysis, but in calculating density for a site, the gross acreage is often what people think you use, but you have to subtract out any right-of-way dedications. And then obviously if there's floodplain, things along those lines, there is no floodplain here. So I guess what I'm saying is although it may be according to the plan 10.2 acres in size, that full 10.2 acres may not be available once we calculate net acreage. And the net acreage obviously cannot be more than, or cannot accommodate more than what the zoning district designation allows. In this case, each relative unit has to be basically a 4,000 square foot lot, so to speak. Although there aren't lots, I'm just saying that's the denominator, so to speak. It probably got more complicated than I want, but what I'm feeling right now is it might exceed what's allowed under the zoning district designation you need to accommodate this type of project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vernich.
I think that's really it. I mean, the retention pond, is that intended to have water in there all the time?
That is, and that was based off prior discussions with the planning department that may be the more desirable
Yeah,
option rather than biodetention or
yeah,
anything else.
yeah. I think if you do that with the water, I mean, it does put a nice, I see if you put a nice fountain in there as people drive by, it makes it more aesthetically pleasing for the residents that are there, but even the people that are driving down the community there. I mean, I think, it is a plus that you did put the building a little further back there. But I mean, I think you've got some good feedback from so far what you've heard tonight. I think if you've got some ideas, I want to encourage you to just try to see how you can address some of that feedback there. And certainly the density. I mean, that's always a number one hot topic that comes up. So
Yeah.
yeah, if your calculations are over, that would certainly be a concern for some folks.
What does the topography of, is that, I've got the area up on Google Street View, but that's always deceiving. Is that fairly flat or is it go?
There's quite a bit of slope down towards Manchester.
Okay, so it'll sit higher up than
The north
the
side is
road.
higher than the south side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, with your permission, I do want to thank Mr. Engel for accommodating those few suggestions we did provide in earlier meetings with him. Those suggestions, as he's mentioned, was using maybe a retention versus detention or bioretention, and certainly recognizing of the pond school and the constraints and confines we're working with that small lot. So we do appreciate it very much, sir.
I appreciate it.
All right.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll just add is, just following up what I said before, I think you've got some good feedback. I've sat in a number of these meetings, and sometimes the feedback is basically that the plan is just not feasible, viable. I think you've got something here. It's more of a matter of just taking what you've heard today and seeing how you can incorporate that. And the city
Absolutely.
staff, I'm sure, help with any clarification.
Yeah, like the mayor said, I think the villas are probably pretty good. Just make the critical thing is making sure that center building doesn't look overly massive
Mhm.
given the area.
Right. Right.
So, all right.
And
Oh, go ahead.
Travis or Joe, how best to follow up with anyone related to the getting to a net developable acreage calculation, if that's going to change the units that we could potentially develop on the site. Want to get a handle on that as soon as I can.
Sure. Melanie, Travis, and I will get together and we'll do not a quick calculation. We'll do a calculation and try to get it to you quickly.
Okay.
And that way you'll know. For the most part, I need to check a couple of things in the code just to see how it plays out. But as I say, we understand the urgency, and obviously the property owners are anxious as well. We've been in this process for a bit prior to tonight's meeting, so
Yep.
try to have something to you maybe beginning of next week, if that's okay.
Yep, that'll be fine.
Thank you.
All right. And with that, can I get a motion to adjourn? All right. Motion by the mayor. I'll second it. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? All right. Thank you. Sorry, it's just the two of us, but appreciate your time and looking forward to seeing what transposes.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks for your
you.
time.
Thank you all.
Have a good night.
Thanks.